Before she became known as the ultimate scream queen and an award-winning multi-genre powerhouse, Jamie Lee Curtis lived a life already entwined with the glitz and chaos of Hollywood. But her early years weren't defined by glamour. They were shaped by a complicated family legacy, a search for self-worth, and the quiet determination to make her own mark on the world. Jamie Lee Curtis was born on November 22, 1958, in Santa Monica, California. Her parents were already Hollywood royalty. Her father, Tony Curtis, was one of the biggest box office stars of the 1950s and 60s, known for hits like Some Like It Hot and Spartacus. Her mother, Janet Leigh, had carved out her own iconic place in film history with her unforgettable performance in Psycho. To the outside world, Jamie had inherited a fairy tale life. But the reality was far more complicated. When she was just 3 years old, her parents divorced, and she was primarily raised by her mother. Her relationship with her father remained strained for much of her life. He was not around, and he was not interested in being a father, Jamie later said candidly. Though surrounded by fame and fortune, Jamie struggled with insecurity and self-doubt. She attended elite private schools in Los Angeles and later enrolled at Choate Rosemary Hall in Connecticut. Despite the resources available to her, she often felt awkward and unsure of herself. I had gray teeth because my mother took tetracycline when she was pregnant with me. I was not pretty. I was cute. I had a lot of personality, she once admitted. Academically, Jamie didn't thrive. She called herself a terrible student, lacking the focus and drive that school demanded. She eventually enrolled at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California, with the intention of studying law and becoming a police officer, a far cry from the spotlight her parents occupied. I never thought I'd be an actor, she once said. I thought being a police officer would give me an opportunity to be useful without having to have a whole lot of education. But after just one semester, she dropped out. The call of Hollywood, though faint at first, was growing louder. Her entry into acting wasn't glamorous. A friend encouraged her to audition for the role of Nancy Drew at Universal Studios. She didn't get the part, but the experience ignited something. She began studying acting and landed a contract with Universal, appearing in TV roles like Quincy, Maine, and Operation Petticoat. That show, ironically based on a film her father had starred in, marked her first big break, until she was abruptly fired along with most of the cast. I was devastated. I thought my life was over, she recalled. But fate had something else in store. Just months later, she auditioned for a low-budget horror film by an unknown director named John Carpenter. The role? Laurie Strode in Halloween. Jamie didn't glide into Hollywood on her parents' coattails. If anything, she felt weighed down by their legacies. Industry insiders were quick to dismiss her as just another nepotism case. She had to fight to prove herself, not just to audiences, but to casting directors and producers who doubted her skills. And then there was the pressure to look the part. Early in her career, a cameraman told her that her puffy eyes might hurt her on-screen presence. It shook her confidence so deeply that she later underwent cosmetic surgery, a decision she came to regret. I felt misshapen, just not natural anymore, she said, and I think it was a big stimulator of my drug use. Still, Jamie was no stranger to reinvention. She learned to turn her vulnerabilities into strengths, owning her insecurities and speaking openly about them in later years. Her grounded, self-aware nature would later become a defining trait, one that endeared her to fans and helped her survive an industry that isn't always kind. Despite the privileges and pitfalls of her famous surname, Jamie Lee Curtis was determined to succeed on her own terms. I want very much to be recognized for my abilities, for the work I put in, she once said. And yet it's still always there, who my parents were. And that drive, to be seen not as the daughter of Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, but as Jamie, would ultimately lead her to create a legacy all her own. As she prepared to step into her first major film role in Halloween, no one, least of all Jamie, could have predicted how that performance would change the trajectory of her life forever. When Jamie Lee Curtis stepped onto the set of Halloween in 1978, she was 19 years old, insecure, and fresh off a disappointing firing from her first major television job. What she didn't know was that her world, and the horror genre, was about to change forever. Directed by the then relatively unknown John Carpenter, Halloween was a low-budget indie horror film with modest expectations. Curtis was cast as Laurie Strode, a teenage babysitter hunted by the masked killer Michael Myers. It was her first feature film, and a major risk. Yet she brought a natural vulnerability and strength to the role that resonated with audiences in a way that no one expected. The film was a massive hit. Made for just over $300,000, Halloween went on to gross more than $70 million worldwide. Jamie's performance launched her into the spotlight and earned her the title of Scream Queen, a moniker given to actresses known for their roles in horror films, especially those who could both convey fear and outwit it. "Halloween changed everything for me," Curtis later said. "It gave me a career." Following the success of Halloween, Jamie leaned into the horror genre, becoming the face of a new wave of slasher films. Her next few roles helped cement her status as a genre icon. In 1980, The Fog had her reuniting with Carpenter. Jamie played Elizabeth Solly, a hitchhiker who gets caught up in a ghostly revenge tale in a small coastal town. The film was eerie, atmospheric, and allowed Curtis to explore a more mature, mysterious screen presence. Prom Night was a Canadian slasher which gave her a leading role as a high school senior whose prom night turns deadly. The film was a hit and furthered her reputation as a horror leading lady. Terror Train was a thriller set aboard a moving train during a costume party with a masked killer on board. Jamie again played the final girl archetype, resilient, resourceful, and relatable. Road Games in 1981 was an Australian thriller that cast her opposite Stacy Keach as a hitchhiker in the outback, showcasing her range beyond traditional Scream Queen roles. Despite critics often brushing off horror films as lowbrow at the time, Jamie brought emotional depth and intelligence to each of her characters. She wasn't just running and screaming, she was thinking, strategizing, and surviving. By the early 1980s, Curtis began to feel boxed in by the horror genre. Determined not to be pigeonholed, she actively sought roles that would allow her to grow beyond the Scream Queen image. In 1983, she achieved a major breakthrough in Trading Places, a comedy starring Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. As Ophelia, a savvy and sharp-witted intimacy provider who helps the protagonists outsmart corrupt financiers, Curtis displayed comedic chops that surprised audiences and critics alike. The performance earned her a BAFTA Award for Best Supporting Actress. It was a turning point. Jamie had proven that she wasn't just a genre star. She was a real actress, capable of holding her own in comedy, drama, and everything in between. Her evolution continued with roles in films like A Fish Called Wanda in 1988. Curtis starred alongside Kevin Kline and John Cleese in this acclaimed British-American heist comedy. Her portrayal of the smart and seductive Wanda cemented her as a leading lady in both drama and comedy. Blue Steel in 1990 was a darker, more intense turn. Curtis played a rookie NYPD officer in a cat-and-mouse thriller. The role displayed her ability to carry a suspense-driven film with serious emotional weight. Jamie Lee Curtis had transformed from the girl-next-door survivor in a slasher film into a versatile, bankable movie star. While many stars faded after their initial genre success, Jamie only seemed to shine brighter. Despite her branching out, Curtis never abandoned her horror roots. She reprised her role as Laurie Strode several times over the decades, each time with more depth and emotional complexity. In doing so, she redefined what it meant to be a final girl. Not just a survivor, but a symbol of strength, trauma, and resilience. "I think Laurie Strode represents the power of women to endure and fight back," Curtis once said. "She's not a victim. She's a warrior." By the late 1990s, Jamie Lee Curtis had already achieved what most actors only dream of: genre-defining roles, critical acclaim, and the kind of staying power that made her a household name. But instead of coasting on past success, she chose to evolve. She stepped into new spaces: children's literature, advocacy, body image activism, and embraced a new kind of fame, one rooted in honesty and resilience. After a string of hits like True Lies in 1994, where she played opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of her most iconic roles, Curtis began to take a step back from Hollywood. She focused more on her family and her sobriety, after publicly acknowledging a long battle with painkiller addiction, and writing. She authored more than a dozen children's books, many dealing with themes of self-esteem, adoption, and understanding emotions. Books like Tell Me Again, About the Night I Was Born and Big Words for Little People were praised for their emotional intelligence and gentle approach to complex topics. She also became a vocal advocate for body positivity and aging naturally in an industry obsessed with perfection. "I've had plastic surgery. I've done it. It didn't work. It got me addicted to Vicodin," she said in a Raw interview. "It's a fraud. I want to try to be who I am." Curtis returned triumphantly to her Halloween roots in 2018 with David Gordon Green's reboot sequel. This time, Laurie Strode was not a wide-eyed teen, but a trauma-scarred survivor turned survivalist grandmother, ready to face down the monster that had haunted her for 40 years. The film was a box office smash, and her performance was widely praised for adding emotional weight to a genre not always known for nuance. "Laurie is a metaphor," Curtis said. "She represents people who carry trauma for decades and still find the strength to fight." That role, rooted in survival and justice, would soon gain new relevance as a very real conversation about power, assault, and accountability swept through Hollywood. When the #MeToo movement erupted in 2017, Jamie Lee Curtis was among the many high-profile women to support the movement and call for systemic change. But as the movement grew and public figures were canceled amid allegations, Curtis voiced a more cautious perspective, one that drew both praise and criticism. She wrote an op-ed in the Huffington Post, expressing concern over how quickly some were being tried in the court of public opinion without due process. "We must distinguish between the predators and the people who are just flawed," she wrote. "We can't just burn everything down." Some saw her words as undermining the movement, accusing her of tone deafness. Others appreciated the nuance, especially survivors who wanted justice but feared mob mentality. Curtis later clarified that her comments weren't a defense of bad behavior, but a plea for careful justice. "I'm a woman. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I support the movement deeply, but I also believe in redemption and in fairness." In retrospect, her perspective was one that many would come to appreciate as the movement matured, that supporting victims and preserving nuance are not mutually exclusive. And in light of the landmark legal battle that pitted its ends with U.S. Director Justin Baldoni against Blake Lively, her more balanced approach to the #MeToo movement has been proven to be very much justified and reasonable. In 2023, Jamie Lee Curtis won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in Everything Everywhere All at Once, a surreal, genre-bending film that let her stretch her skills in hilarious, vulnerable, and bizarre directions. Accepting the Oscar, she said with emotion, "I know it looks like I'm standing up here by myself, but I am not. I am hundreds of people, the group of artists who made this movie. We just won an Oscar." It was the culmination of a career marked by persistence, reinvention, and never backing down from hard truths, even the uncomfortable ones. Now in her 60s, Curtis remains refreshingly candid. Whether she's posting barefaced selfies, supporting LGBTQ+ rights, or speaking on addiction recovery, she has become something rare, a star who grew into a sage. She once said, "I used to dream of being famous. Then I became famous, and it wasn't what I imagined. But now, I dream of being honest, and that's something I can actually be." While Jamie Lee Curtis's career in Hollywood has been anything but conventional, her personal life has been similarly unique. Known for her grounded nature and candid approach to life, Curtis has chosen to keep much of her private life out of the public eye. Until, of course, it became impossible to ignore. Before marrying Christopher Guest, the man who would become her partner for life, Jamie Lee Curtis had been in a number of relationships, though she has always kept her personal affairs relatively quiet. In her early years in Hollywood, she was often linked to co-stars and fellow actors, but she never allowed her relationships to define her public persona. In fact, her early romances were relatively short-lived compared to the stability she would later find with Christopher Guest. Her first serious relationship was with actor and writer John Cleese, whom she worked with in the comedy A Fish Called Wanda. Though their chemistry on screen was undeniable, their romantic relationship was fleeting, and they eventually parted ways. Curtis later revealed that her love life during this time had often been marked by uncertainty, but she found the right balance between career and romance when she met her future husband. In 1984, Curtis met Christopher Guest, the British-American actor, comedian, and filmmaker best known for his roles in films like This Is Spinal Tap and Best in Show. Their connection was instant, and they quickly became a couple. In December 1984, they married in a small, private ceremony. The two have been married for over 3 decades, making their relationship one of Hollywood's most enduring and private. Their union is often celebrated for its stability and their shared values of privacy and authenticity. Curtis has been open about how they have kept their marriage strong, revealing that their shared sense of humor, mutual respect, and commitment to each other have been key factors in their longevity. "We don't have kids to keep our marriage together," she once said. "We have our love, and that's all we need." Their marriage also led to a shared passion for social causes. Both Curtis and Guest are known for their work in philanthropy, particularly in supporting organizations that deal with addiction recovery, children's health, and LGBT+ rights. They have worked together on many causes close to their hearts. Jamie and Christopher have 2 adopted children, a son, Thomas, and a daughter, Annie. Curtis has often described motherhood as one of the most rewarding parts of her life. However, she has also been honest about the difficulties of balancing her career and her role as a parent. In an interview, she said, "I didn't have the childhood I wanted, and I wanted to give my children the world." The family has been very private, and the children's identities have been kept out of the public eye to preserve their privacy. Nonetheless, Jamie has spoken warmly about her children, sharing how motherhood has influenced her personal and professional life. She described her children as the best part of her journey. "Parenting is the hardest job you'll ever love," she said. While Jamie Lee Curtis's public image is largely that of a grounded, unpretentious Hollywood star, there is an interesting and lesser-known detail about her marriage. Through her husband, Christopher Guest, she became a title holder in British nobility. Christopher Guest, born into a prominent British family, holds the title of 5th Baron Hayden Guest, which means that Jamie, through her marriage, became a baroness. The couple's noble status is something Jamie Lee Curtis has never used as part of her public persona, and the fact that she holds a title is a piece of her life that has remained largely under the radar for many years. When they married, Jamie adopted the title of Lady Hayden Guest, though she has rarely used it. In interviews, she has made it clear that the title is of little interest to her. "It's just a name. It doesn't change who we are," she once said, underscoring her preference for staying grounded despite her marriage into British aristocracy. However, it's a fascinating tidbit about her life that illustrates the unusual blending of Hollywood glamour with European nobility, a combination she never let define her. Curtis's down-to-earth demeanor and refusal to let fame and titles influence her self-image have made her stand out in an industry often obsessed with wealth and status. Through her long marriage to Christopher Guest, Jamie Lee Curtis has created a life for herself that is as rich in love and stability as it is in professional success. As a wife, mother, and public figure, she continues to inspire by rejecting the trappings of celebrity and instead focusing on what truly matters: family, honesty, and authenticity. Curtis's decision to remain largely out of the spotlight on a personal level, despite her marriage to a British nobleman, reflects her consistent choice to prioritize privacy and personal well-being over fame. Her ability to balance her Hollywood career with her family life has made her a rare example of a star who has kept her feet firmly planted in reality. As Jamie Lee Curtis continues to live life on her own terms, her story remains an ongoing journey. Her contributions to film, her activism, and her role as a mother and wife show that she is more than just a scream queen or a Hollywood icon. She's a woman who continues to define her legacy in her own way.